In 1900, professional angry working man and Santa impersonator Keir Hardie founded what was originally Britain's third political party of the time, the Labour Party. Originally, politics was a battle between the Liberals and the Conservatives, a far cry from today's Britain, where various red and blue-tied morons bicker whilst the yellow-tie ones go on water slides and do kayaking. However, after the little but totally singular oopsie that was World War I, the Liberal Party was out on its arse, and following the second little oopsie that was World War II, the Labour Party exploded in popularity and won in a landslide. Labour's ideology could be broadly defined as democratic socialism, offering redistribution of wealth in Britain's massive economy to what was called the social wage: healthcare, housing, secure employment and education. However, after almost 80 years in the political sphere, to quote Thatcher's 1979 campaign poster, Labour wasn't working. From mass strikes, industrial inefficiency, fears of an ungovernable state and stagflation, Labour was booted out in early 1979. What followed was 18 years of Tory rule, in which time the Labour Party was almost irreversibly changed, following a path of further militancy, then moderation, and finally, victory. Victory was sweet, and in 1997 Labour won in an even bigger landslide than 1945. But, victory at what cost? In this video, I'm going to break down in a hopefully coherent manner how radicalised unions, one bad winter and two loser leaders left Labour out in the political cold. This is how Labour died. The year is 1978. Britain had had a pretty shit decade so far, with strikes in 72 and 74, an oil shock in 73, and a humiliating cap-in-hand loan from the IMF in 1976. However, between the resignation of the pipe-smoking diva, Harold Wilson, in 1976 and 1978, Britain's economy seemed to be in recovery, boosted by recently discovered North Sea oil and a decently handled crisis. The Prime Minister, Jim Callaghan, was a cheery figure who didn't seem to catch much flack, and the nation seemed more or less on the right track, at least compared to the runaway prices and strikes of the early 1970s. Unfortunately for Sunny Jim, a poorly timed commitment to wage restraints and a profit announcement from Ford Motors sent all that straight into a smelly fat crock of shit. Callaghan was following Labour's prices and incomes policy, which had attempted to quell the worker-employer disputes. Essentially, the government would ensure the upkeep of the social wage, as well as keeping inflation down, so long as trade unions accepted wage increase restraints. The workers of Ford had been told to accept a 5% pay increase, 3% below inflation. And at the time, Ford announced that it had just made £258 million for shareholders, which is just over £1.5 billion today, including an 80% pay rise for the managing director. This pissed off the unions to say the least. The reasoning behind wage restraints was that too high a wage increase would drive inflation, so why was that suddenly okay when Ford took 80%? Regardless of how well you think this argument holds up, what followed was the complete and total disaster that would become known as the Winter of Discontent, as the entire country went arse over tit. Miners, lorry drivers, nurses, bin men, even gravediggers were on strike. The press lambasted Callaghan for going to a diplomatic meeting in the Caribbean, whilst everyone else spent the winter playing Victorian Slum Simulator 1878. Labour lost by 70 seats in the following election and over 2 million votes, ultimately crushing the credibility and popularity of the trade union movement. The unions looked corrupt, militant and absolutely insane, and that winter damaged their image even to this day. Now, a lot can be said for Thatcher's time in office, but that's been covered in more than enough videos for my commentary to mean much. But Labour's time in what is called the political wilderness is less famous. Now, I've just noticed that this script is already a flipping yapfest, so for the mercy of anyone watching this, I'll split this concept into two videos, stopping this part in 1987. Now, back to the main video. So, a sheepish Jim resigned as leader of the party in November 1980. He was replaced by this nerd, Michael Foot. Yeah, that is his actual name. Foot was further to the more Trotskyist left of the party, compared to Callaghan, who was more on the socially democratic right. This was not very palatable to the electorate, firstly because of the association with the militant unions, and secondly because of the recency of the Winter of Discontent. Despite the less than idyllic economic environment of Thatcher's questionable medicine during her first term,
the city was derelict. They had the highest unemployment rates in the country. We were devoid of hope. The government had taken away the opportunity for young people to progress. This was the backdrop to the 1981 People's March for Jobs.
1983 was an even bigger win for the Tories than in 1979. An astronomical 188-seat lead over, God, I still can't believe that was his name, Foot's Labour. To sum up Labour at the time, their 1983 manifesto was coined as the longest suicide note in history. The party had also ended up with the unattractive image of being home to the loony left, a notion helped by the press. Not finding success with Foot, Labour got rid of him, presumably after he turned to ash due to the sheer embarrassment of that election, along with his weird name. He was replaced by this guy here, a Welshman called Neil Kinnock. Scary-faced Neil spent the next 4 years attempting to modernise and moderate the Labour Party, both in policy and membership.
And you go through the years sticking to that, outdated, misplaced, irrelevant to the real needs, and you end in grotesque chaos.
In the haze of the Thatcher Revolution, Kinnock's attempts to pretty up his party went basically ignored by the public, and the 1987 election proved this. Thatcher won again by 144 seats, meaning that poor old Neil had only gained 20 seats in 4 years of modernisation. It seemed that Brits just didn't want increasingly undemocratic socialism, headed by a bunch of old hat unions and a smiley Welshman who spoke without putting spaces between his words. The climate for Labour looked utterly hopeless, and at that stage the party was still 10 long years, and a lot of changing, away from power. Hey, congratulations! Your patience has led you to the end of this introductory video into how Britain's red tide pack of far-left lunatics, or Tories in disguise, depending on your view, died ideologically and, in my opinion, morally. Stay tuned for the sequel, which is pretty much just as depressing as this one. If you have your own ideas on this video, why not stick them in the comments for me to smugly ignore? And while you're at it, if you like what you saw, you might as well subscribe. Or don't.